What's up, Airsofters, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts and experiences of this, the RunCam Scope Cam 4K. Let's get into it. So what is a scope cam? Essentially, it's just an action camera you attach to your gun. They differ from normal action cameras though, as they use different focal length lenses. This means they can see further distances. This gives you more zoomed in footage to see those longer shots. RunCam makes several different scope cams, such as the popular RunCam 2, as well as the newer RunCam Lite. The model I have is the 4K version. The main difference being, as you can probably tell by its name, is its 4K recording capabilities, this being the main reason I went for this model. You can also have the RunCam with 3 different lenses, giving you different distances that you can record at. I have the 40mm lens, which will record between 30 to 70 meters. You can also have a 25mm lens, which will cover 20 to 50 meters, as well as a 16mm lens, which will cover between 10 and 30 meters. So depending on your needs, there's a lens that should cover it. Now unfortunately, there's no quick way of switching between the lenses, which is a shame, because it'd be nice to be able to have a few extra spares in your bag, which you can swap out depending on your game type. For example, if you're sniping in the forest one day, you'll need the longer focal length of the 40mm lens versus something like the 60mm for CQB. Currently, the 4K 40mm version which I have is retailing on Amazon for about £160, which at first does seem like quite a lot of money. However, when you consider you're getting a 4K action cam, I think it's worth the money. You could opt for the cheaper model, the RunCam Lite, which is currently selling for about £120. However, the maximum resolution you'll be able to record at will be 1440 at 30 frames per second. I'll pop a link to the model which I have in the description down below. I won't run through the full specs of this model, however I will pop a link to these in the video description so you can go and check them out for yourself. I will, however, touch on some of the highlights. It uses a Sony 8MP image sensor and allows you to record in several different resolutions and frame rates. You can choose between 4K at 30 frames per second, 2.7K at 60 frames per second, and then 1080p at either 120, 100, 60 or 50 frames per second, and finally 720p at 240 frames per second. Most people will probably want to use 60 frames per second in order to get that super smooth slow-mo footage. However, I have gone for the high resolution of 4K. I rarely slow down my footage, and the benefit of filming at a higher resolution not only means you get better quality out of the camera, but if you're working on a project which is of a lower resolution, say 1440 or even 1080p, it allows you to punch in on that footage without losing any quality and gives you another level of zoom. The video format is MP4, and I strongly recommend you use Samsung microSD cards, U3 rated, no larger than 128GB. Shooting at 4K 30 frames per second, I get about 2 hours of footage out of a 64GB card, which is great for me, because that usually takes me up to around lunchtime, where I can swap it out for another card. Using 2 smaller cards instead of 1 larger card will limit the risk of you losing all your footage for the day if that card was to become corrupted. Originally I was running SanDisk cards, however I had quite a few incidents where all my footage had become corrupted. Since swapping to these Samsung cards, touch wood, I've had no issues so far. The camera runs off these small 850mAh batteries, and RunCam claim that shooting at 4K 30 frames per second, they should last about 100 minutes. In reality, you're going to get about an hour. You can buy spare batteries and swap them out, however this is really fiddly to do out in the field, especially with gloves on. What I tend to do is run the camera off an external power bank attached to my gun, which gives me more than enough juice for the day. According to RunCam, you can also power the camera off a 2 or 3 cell LiPo battery. If you are interested in spare batteries, I paid £13 for 2 off Amazon, and I'll pop a link to these in the description below. Weight wise, with the battery installed in the camera, it comes out at 96 grams. That's 82 grams without a battery in it. The reason for this lightweight is because the entire body of the camera is made out of plastic. This includes the inbuilt toolless Picatinny rail for connecting the camera to your gun. Whereas you do get the benefits of lightness, you unfortunately sacrifice strength. Although I have bashed my camera around into several trees and bits of cover, it's not taken too many direct hits yet, so I can't say for sure if the plastic would hold up or if it would start to crack. One area though that is a massive issue is the Picatinny mount being made out of plastic. On the first day of using this camera, the Picatinny mount snapped off, which is why it's all covered in glue and random bolts right now. This is not an isolated incident either. A friend of mine has the RunCam Lite and he had exactly the same problem with the mount snapping. A quick search on the internet also reveals that this is a common issue. You can buy a replacement part made out of metal from America for about £8. I'll pop links to these down below. But I cannot for the life of me understand why they've made such a critical structural part of the camera out of such flimsy material. They must know this is an issue. I mean, why else would they offer a replacement made out of metal? Let's just hope they address this in future versions of the camera. Whilst we're talking about replaceable parts, one good thing about this camera is you can replace the tempered glass lens protector in case it becomes damaged. Now these cost about £8 for a pack of 2. This means you don't necessarily need to buy a separate lens protector, which is good because the more glass you put in front of a camera lens, the higher chance that your footage become degraded and also reflections can occur. The RunCam also comes with an inbuilt microphone, although I'll be honest, the quality of this isn't the best, so if you're relying on this as your primary source of audio, I'll definitely look into other options.
Yeah, across the river.
You can turn the microphone off in the app settings, however I tend to leave it on because it makes syncing your footage in the editing process a lot easier. Looking at the camera itself, as mentioned earlier, the body is made from plastic. Now I couldn't find any information online to whether or not this is weather sealed, but I'll be honest, I'd be surprised if it was. To help keep the water out, I've 3D printed a couple of these covers which just slide in over the top of the camera. The cameras only come in black, but there's nothing stopping you from painting it up with a nice camo design. Alternatively, getting hold of one of these 3D covers means you can paint this up a lot easier without damaging the camera itself. It also means you can have a few different designs which you can swap in and out depending on your situation. Looking at the top of the camera, you have these 2 buttons as well as these 3 LEDs which show your battery charge level. This button is used to put the camera into Wi-Fi connect mode when you're trying to connect the camera to your app. I have found this to be a little hit and miss in the past as to when it wants to work, however when it does connect, the connection is secure. The second button is your power button, which also doubles up as your record button. When powered on, there will be a red light around the power button. This will then flash when it's recording. Now this can give away your position when you're out in the field. Fortunately, you can turn this light off in the app. On the back of the camera, you'll find these 2 LEDs. This LED will indicate when the camera is on charge and will also stay on when it's plugged into an external power bank. The LED on the left will stay solid when the camera is on and then flash when it's recording. You also have this micro USB connector for charging the batteries, but also for powering the camera off an external power bank. Now, if you open this little door here, inside you'll find the battery and the SD card. The SD card is sprung loaded, but be careful because it comes out like a catapult. I mean, several times this thing's flown across the room and I've almost lost it. As mentioned a few times, the camera comes complete with an app for controlling it. When you get the Wi-Fi to work, the app is very intuitive and it allows you to change several settings on the camera. What I like most about the app is your ability to fine-tune your video settings such as your sharpness, white balance and shutter speeds. So what are my thoughts and experiences of the RunCam 4K? On the whole, they've been positive. I did actually have a RunCam Scope Cam Lite before the 4K version, however I did have a lot of issues with that model. You would turn it on to record and then 30 seconds later it would just turn itself off again. As well as that, I would have entire SD cards worth of footage become corrupted, although back then I was using the SanDisk cards instead of the Samsung, so that might have explained that. And then on the very rare occasions where it did actually work, the quality of the footage, even on the highest settings, wasn't actually that good. So I ended up sending it back. I mean, I don't know if it was just a dud model, but I wasn't that impressed by it. My early days of using the 4K model weren't exactly plain sailing either. I mentioned earlier that on the very first day that the Picatinny mount broke, I ended up having to tape the camera to my gun. After that, I did encounter some issues with corrupted data. However, I must say, since changing to the Samsung cards, I've not had this issue yet. One thing I have found as well is there doesn't seem to be that big a community around these cameras. So when I was trying to diagnose the issues I was having, trying to find the help I needed was difficult. So other than the issues with the build quality of the Picatinny mount, as well as the issues with the SD cards, which can be solved by using the right brand, on the whole, I love this camera. The quality of the footage is great, and that 40mm lens means you can get really close up into the action. You can see your BBs hitting an enemy from some distance away. Ever thought people weren't calling their hits? Well, with this camera, there's no hiding from it. You can fire up the app and play back the footage there and then. Now, I'm not too hot on the fact that the entire body is made out of plastic, especially the Picatinny rail. However, I do like the lightness of it. And when you've got as many accessories on your gun as I have, every little bit helps. The camera also has a nice sleek low profile, which is good as it sits just below my scopes. And even though I think the Wi-Fi can be a little bit tricky, the app on the whole is great. Battery life is good enough to get you through an hour's game at full settings. Obviously this will increase if you lower the settings down, but being able to plug it into an external power bank solves all my needs anyway. I will mention though that I've heard that the micro USB port on the back of the camera is prone to damaging easily. Now this means if you've got a cable plugged into it and you knock it, you could damage your charging port. I've got around this by using this magnetic charger, which means if it does take a whack, it will just come off the magnet and not damage your internals. The inclusion of the inbuilt Picatinny mount is nice, albeit needing some improvement, but it does make it super quick and easy to attach the camera to your gun. I guess the big question is, would I buy this camera again? And the simple answer is yes, I would. Competition wise, there's probably only two models I've come across worth mentioning, those being the Foxeer Legend 2 and the Mobius 2. However, I have struggled to find a good UK supplier. I'd like to get my hands on them so I could do a three-way comparison with the RunCam, so if you guys know of any floating around, stick a comment down below. I hope you found this video useful. Please give it a thumbs up below if you have. If you own a RunCam, or if you're thinking about getting one, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Did you also know that 65% of you watching this aren't subscribed? It really does help me out guys, so if you're new here, please consider subscribing and click that little bell icon too so you're notified when I release new videos, and I'll see you in the next one.